President Trump causing a stir in the media with a remark he made to Russia's President Putin at G20. I'll roll that tape. Joining us now is General Jack Keane, a Fox News senior strategic analyst. I've got my ears back in. Producers, you may talk to me during this interview I hear you, Justin. Don't worry about it. Right, sorry about that, General. We can hear what you've got to say, and I want you to tell us what is our overall policy towards Russia.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a work in progress. First of all, Russia itself, you know, they're not the Soviet Union in terms of their military power. They have half the population the United States has. Their economy is about the size of Canada. So they're not the Soviet Union, but they are formidable because of Putin's ambitions. And what are those? He wants to end the United States' global hegemony. He wants to change the international order as it currently is. And to achieve some of this, he wants to weaken NATO, break the transatlantic alliance if he can, and also he's undermining Western democracies. There's a lot of political polarization, particularly in Europe, as you know, and there's a lack of trust in those governments. And he's taken clear advantage of all of that. He's invaded two countries, Georgia and Ukraine, his neighbors, and he also now has strategic influence because of his intervention in Syria, in the Middle East. All that said, what can we do? One, keep the sanctions on him, because we don't want him to have the resources to build a more potential significant military than what they do have. Two, hybrid warfare, what he introduced in Ukraine, is something we're still struggling with and how to deal with it, because they disguise it as conventional warfare, massive information campaigns, huge cyber offensive operations. We don't have a very good approach to deal with that. The third thing is stop treating him as a partner. He's really an adversary. It's not that we don't talk to this guy. Of course, talk to him. But he's not a partner. He's never going to help us. He's never going to help solve problems we have with NATO. Can he help? Do we have mutual interest in nuclear weapons, the numbers and size of that? Yeah, of course we do. Do we have mutual interest in terrorism? Yes. But that's about it.
But surely President Trump realizes and knows that he's not a friend of ours, he's not a partner of ours, he's an adversary and a rival. The president knows that, but just in public, he doesn't want to say, Vlad, get out of here.
The president puts a lot of emphasis on personal diplomacy, probably more than most presidents in the past, that he has a lot of confidence in that. And certainly, if he can make some progress with Putin on some of these thorny, tough issues, all be it. But you got to understand clearly where Putin is coming from. Does he know that Putin is a thug? Yeah, he's a killer. And that every single day he gets up thinking about what he can do to weaken the United States. Yeah, he understands all of that. The other thing we've got to make sure is we're shoring up NATO, Stuart. And the president is right about those countries putting more in defense. And we're going to have to put more troops there on the eastern part of NATO.
Really?
As a deterrence.
We're going to have to do that?
Yeah, we're going to have to do that.
So more troops going
we don't have much there. I mean, we're not going back to 400,000 troops like we had during the Cold War. But we've got about a brigade size of troops there. We need to have a division headquarters and another brigade there. And that's something Putin clearly understands. NATO has to belly up as well and make more commitments. And the president is leading the charge on that.
It's just fascinating because the media thinks that Trump likes Putin and shakes his hand and gets along well with him. I think the president realizes that he is an adversary and a rival.
Oh, that's true.
Treating him differently.
You know, one thing I wish he would talk about is, I know this for a fact because I've been briefed on it, is the success we had in pushing back on the Russians' intervention in the 2018 elections. It is really quite remarkable what we did. Not only did we stop it, but we imposed cost on them in their trying to do it.
Really?
Yes, and they know when they're coming after us in 2020, which they will do, we're going to impose even more cost on them.
Now, we didn't know that.
And we should talk about it more.
Yes, we should. And I'm sorry we left it till the end of the interview, because that was a good nugget right there. You've been briefed on this.
Yes, I have.
We like that. General, thanks for joining us, sir.
Good talking to you.
Yes, sir.